Hello and welcome to We Never Met, the podcast where I sit down with people that I've never met before in real life. Today we have Barb,
Hi.
who's on the show. So essentially, we've never met in person. Fun fact: I actually saw you. I think. Were you at the Cream City?
Yep.
Yeah.
Turner Hall,
Yep.
Sunday. Yep.
Yeah, and that's a kind of a good segue into what you do, kind of. Is it a full-time thing, or is
at
it?
least how you know me because of
Yeah,
Instagram.
exactly right. Yeah.
Yep.
Which is MissMashedUp.
Yes, it's a tongue twister.
Was that on purpose? The tongue twister?
Kind of.
Yeah.
It was originally supposed to be MissMashed.
Okay.
Or MissMash. Something like that. And then I tried to do the Etsy
Sure.
shop and they wouldn't. Somebody must have had it. So then I had to be like,
someone had
so
it
then
in
I put the, I don't know, made it into that.
So
MissMashedUp.
to give some context, that is a clothing brand where you take like two articles of clothing essentially and make them into one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mostly what I do is I take flannel. I love to thrift. So one of my things that I love to do is thrifting. And so I thrift everything and upcycle these garments. Do jackets, flannels, anything kind of catches my eye. And then I take T-shirts mostly, or sometimes sweatshirts or others. I have made things out of just cutting them and doing lettering to myself.
Sure.
And then make a back patch. Pretty simple. Simple idea.
Were you always into sewing, or like were like creating things? Is that why you kind of did it?
Kind of. I mean, I'm old and people can't see me, but
Not old.
no, well, So I'm 56, and in high school, I took every sewing class that I could. Back in the day, way back in the olden days, we had home ec.
Oh yeah, we had to too. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school in Franklin, so about 20 minutes south of here.
Yeah.
It didn't transfer into high school. I don't think we had it, but in middle school we had like sewing. I made a pillow once.
Yeah.
And stuff. So yeah, we had a little bit of that,
Mm-hmm.
but I was never really that good at it. So.
Well, I liked it. And so I took all these sewing classes. And in fact, in our basement, when my brother moved out, because he had his black light room where he smoked pot all the time.
Sure.
And so when he moved out, I converted the pot smoking black light room into my sewing room.
Oh.
It got very wholesome.
Yeah, really.
So I
really
think my parents
180.
they were very happy about this.
Yeah.
And so I had this great place where I could sew. I sewed most of my clothes. But then when I went to college and left
Like the
home,
clothes you actually wore.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yep. And I sewed quilts and I loved it.
Yeah.
And then when I went to school, I majored in English, at least at first, before I changed my major lots of times.
Sure.
When you live in an apartment, you don't have space to sew because it's really, you need space.
Yeah.
And only recently, with this MissMashedUp, did I bought a sewing machine because my old one didn't, it was all rusted and it wouldn't work anymore.
Sure.
But anyway, there was a time where I loved sewing. I sewed a lot. And then there were lots of years where I didn't sew.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And now I'm sewing again.
So it's kind of on and off. And then this is kind of makes it more consistent, at least, that you do it more often because you're creating stuff all the time. And is it like a constant thing where you're like, oh, I'm going to put stuff up all the time? Or is it kind of when you get inspired, like, oh, that's a really cool jean jacket. Maybe I can do something with that. Or is it more just like, I want to kind of get stuff out there and see if people like it?
Yeah, I started it under a year ago. So
it was recent.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a real job.
Sure.
And I'm a mom, and I'm a mom of 2 college students.
Okay.
So when they were in high school, I also liked to thrift when I was in high school and college.
Yeah.
But then, life happened. But then, especially our daughter Marie, she loves to thrift, and so I also would thrift and find cool stuff, and I'd bring it home. Like, do you love this? Yes. And so I started buying stuff at the thrift stores I was going to, and I was accumulating a problem. I was getting too much stuff.
Sure.
And so
like, what do I do with that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was really cool, but they aren't my size.
Yeah, exactly.
But I had to buy them because they were $5. Yeah. And so when the kids they are back to back in school, when they went to college, I had my empty nest kind of idea that I would open a thrift store.
Oh yeah.
And I did on Etsy. So that preceded MissMashedUp. So I've had the thrift store for a couple of years. Then one day I had a flannel, an old vintage flannel, and I put that down where I take my pictures for my thrift store.
Yeah.
And I had an old pillowcase. It was someone had embroidered it or something.
Oh.
And not that because I did not invent this idea, right? That people put back patches on their flannels, but I was photographing both of them, and then I visually wanted. I was like, oh, this pillowcase needs a more of a contrast.
Yeah.
So I put it on the back of this flannel that I had that I was selling both of these things.
Yeah.
And I was like, that looks super cool.
Yeah.
I should sew that on the back of that shirt, which I never did yet. I mean, I still have these pieces.
Yeah.
And then that made me think later. I tried to hook Marie, my daughter, into it, and she's like my youthful front, I call her. Because she's kind of going along with it, but she's rolling her eyes, basically. This is your thing, Mom. And I'm like, I like it. So then I started it in last January. So this is the first holiday season that I've gone through.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, am I talking too much
for
the podcast?
No, it's all talk. It's all talking. But yeah, the stuff you create is sold in like stores around here too, which is cool.
Yes.
Like, how did those opportunities come about?
Yes, so that's a story because I started in January and I started the Etsy shop and posted some things, and frankly, the Etsy stuff doesn't sell that much.
Yeah.
So
Etsy is a tough site because it's like you have to kind of know what you're looking for almost.
Right, you have to put the right search engines.
There's so much stuff on there. Yeah.
Yes, it's so
cool
big.
Stuff, but a lot. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I remember this day because it was a snow day and all my people had canceled, all my clients.
Okay.
And so I'm home and I was like, yes, I can sew.
Yeah.
And so I'm sewing stuff, and I had one of those Milwaukee Home, the logo that everyone knows, the square. And I had found at Goodwill a Milwaukee Home logo, but it had the Buck Spango guy.
Oh, sure.
In
Yeah.
the
It was
O.
like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yep. And so I cut that up and I sewed it on this flannel, and I went out on the front porch where I take my photos, and I did my photos that snow day, and I posted it. And the next morning I woke up, and Melissa, who was the creator of that brand, had reposted it on the Milwaukee Home site and saying something like, oh, look at what people do with our old T-shirts or something.
Yeah.
And then she reached out and messaged me via Instagram saying, hey, let's talk. Yeah. And she had stockpiled. I went down to the shop because they have a shop in the third ward. Mm-hmm. And she had stockpiled all these sort of one-offs. These
that they never use,
They couldn't sell. They may have been a little, tilted, or they may have been faded or something, right?
Sure.
She had this mother load of T-shirts.
Oh, wow.
And so she said, hey, if you
take them.
if you want to create with these, I'll sell them in the shop, which is such a great Milwaukee generous
deal.
Deal. It was amazing. So then I went home. I was so excited. I sewed up a bunch, took them to her. She sold them, and that was a big catalyst for me thinking this is great, and then people following on Instagram and getting into a couple of the craft fairs, like at Turner Hall on Sunday, and
Yeah, so you mentioned that's not your real job, and what is your real job?
So my real job is a psychotherapist.
Okay, and how long have you been doing that for?
Let's see. I started at Pathfinders for runaways when I got my master's degree, so that was in like 90. So what's that?
What is Pathfinders?
So Pathfinders for Runaways is a shelter for runaways, and
is
Pathfinders
it here in Milwaukee?
Yep, it's here. And it's still going. It's a great program.
Yeah.
I actually started there when I was 20 as a volunteer.
Oh, cool.
And before I went back to grad school or anything. And so I volunteered there and then became a house manager there and then became a family therapist there.
Is that kind of how you got into it? Like, did you, from a young age, were you like, I want to be a therapist? No?
No.
I don't want to help. I
don't want to help people.
Yeah,
Are you kidding?
I don't want to hear it.
So close.
I mean, it is. I feel like it's such a tough thing because I don't know how intensively I talked to you about this, but I see a therapist, and sometimes when I leave, I'm like, that was an hour, and they do that all day.
Yeah.
They just listen to people. And rarely is it you're there because you're in this great place. Usually you're there because you need help.
You're working out something.
Yeah, you need to figure it out. And I'm just like, man, that must be draining over the course of like months.
Yeah, I mean they have what's called compassion fatigue or burnout that way, and we have to be really careful about that. That's why having side hustles is really fun and therapeutic, very much in its own right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started out at Pathfinders, and I changed my major in undergrad probably a good 4 times.
So
I went
a
to
typical
UWM.
kind of college experience. Like searching. I don't really know. Yeah. What were your majors before you got to that point?
Well, I started out in English because I had this romantic idea
you could be a writer?
Not a writer, that I could just read books and talk about like what's happening in the books with people.
Oh.
Like I had that idea that an English professor just got to read and just talk to people about it. Wasn't this book great? Didn't you like that character? That's what I had my image was. And then I took a few real English classes and realized, this is really hard work and my brain hurts and I can't do this. I'm going to switch.
Yeah.
And I went to communication for a while and tried psych, but then they had to do those rat things. And
what is that?
Well, and they had to do experiments with rats or mice or I didn't know.
Because you felt bad for the mice, or because you didn't like mice generally?
I think all of that. I just didn't want to.
Didn't want to be a part of it.
I didn't want to do whatever they were doing with the mice, and it had a lot more math. I kind of avoided the math.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. So fast forward, and then you decided you were, what was it? English major?
Well, yeah, it was English. I ended up actually, my degree's in education, but it's a non-teaching degree. It's called educational studies. So it was really cool. I don't think they have it anymore.
Where'd you go to college?
At UWM.
UWM, okay.
So what are they called? House fellows, RAs. She told me about this degree that I could get if I talked to someone in the education department.
Sure.
And you had to have a certain GPA and whatever to qualify, and you could pretty much fashion your own degree.
Oh, cool.
But it wasn't education, and I took a lot of human development courses that I really geeked out about. I loved human development. A lot of grad courses in that, even for the undergrad. And then I got a certificate in youth and family studies, youth and family work. Because at that point, then I was working at Pathfinders. I was volunteering and working there, and found out that I loved Pathfinders. I loved the experience working with adolescents. It was
just to kind of segue, what is that kind of experience like? Because I would think that would be a very unique experience, especially with runaways specifically. So they just come to the shelter? Do they know about it, or do people kind of tell them to go there? Like, how does that even work? Because if I was, like, let's say running away from my parents or something, or running away from a situation specifically, I don't think I'd know about it. So is it kind of like people get directed there from people that they know or something? So this is late 80s, wait, let me think about this. I started there in 84, 83. Okay, so this is a long time ago in which there were no cell phones, right? Yep.
And so in phone booths there would be posters saying, are you a runaway? Call this number, hotline, runaway hotline. So kind of like how the suicide hotline is promoted so much now. It was promoted more. You'd maybe go into middle school counselor office and see a poster. And basically all those the school social workers know about it. So everybody in the social service industry would know about it. And kids as kids learn about lots of things, learn about it from each other. Or as what would happen, not infrequently, people would be taking in, let's say someone's child's friend is in distress. So you're a 15-year-old and your friend is in distress. Their family's all messed up. Somehow you bring home Tommy, let's say, and your parents are like, we can't keep Tommy. Tommy's parents don't know he's here or whatever. And then those adults would say, hey, maybe look through the yellow pages and find Pathfinders, and they'd call us. And so so I haven't worked there for a long time, and I do know they are still operating a wonderful program. I just am very curious about how it works now, because with cell phones and stuff, I would think they would be. It just must be different, but they still, I'm sure, have the hotline. People would call, so we'd have a 24-hour crisis hotline. Kids would show up at the door, knocking on the door, middle of the night. We'd do intakes.
So what would be the, I guess, goal for like kids that would come in? I mean, I'm sure it's different case by case basis, but generally, are you trying to get them back to, I mean, because like, assumingly they ran away because the situation was so toxic and bad that they didn't want to be there anymore. So like, what do they end up, what's the end goal for the kids that come in?
Well, it would depend, right? Because I remember some very dire, horrible situations in which I'm reporting abuse, and they'd have to be removed, and we'd go to court and do emergency hearings. But the bulk of them would be reuniting and trying to figure out what got to this point in the family. And so we would have family sessions that we could only keep them, I believe it was 24 hours without permission from the parent.
Sure.
So we would do an
because
intake.
They're minors,
Yep. And so then we would call the parents. Most of the time the parents would grant permission because they're glad they're in a safe place.
Yeah.
Pathfinder was more structured, I'm sure still is.
Yeah.
Highly structured, more than a lot of family situations are structured. And the kids really would thrive too. They would know when dinner is. We all sat down for dinner.
Yeah.
There was everyone in bed at a certain time, lights out, super structured. Which goes to the mental health thing, and which structure is important. I mean, structure is really important for us to develop really good anticipatory feel for situations and for our lives, versus when we have too much open space, we can kind of drift, and it can trigger mental health challenges. Yeah,
sure. I mean, I can definitely relate to that because at when I was really young, I got diagnosed with like OCD and an anxiety disorder. And the more my days are structured and I have things to do, and the less I have free time to just like think about all the terrible thoughts that I'm thinking about, in my head, the better, know? It's just, it's the free time where I'm just sitting around, and that, that's when all the really bad anxiety stuff happens, is when I just freely am able to just sit and just think about whatever I want. And so I
keeping busy and being really invested in things really helps to clean that out, so to speak.
So do you like being a psychotherapist? Is that something that you enjoy?
I like it a lot.
I guess, is there specific like types, because I know there's so many different like ways. There's art therapy and there's things like that. What do you do at your practice? Is it more cognitive behavioral therapy, things like that?
Yeah. I hate to use the word eclectic, but it's a mixture of stuff. So when I was in school, what was in fashion, so to speak, was brief family therapy, systemic therapy, strategic therapy. So at UWM, where I got my master's in social work, so I have an MSW, that was the trending thing. And so we were trained in solution focused. And that was culturally when managed care was happening. HMOs were happening. So it was smart, really, of UWM to promote this, because it made you more attractive, I think, to be hired, because you were working with people in a very short-term model.
Sure.
But that really bothered me, because first of all, it was a little too superficial for me. A little too much based on tools and kind of here, learn this and then get you out. And I felt a little bit controlled by the insurance companies, dictating what someone's health needed versus what their health needs, their mental health needs. So I had a mentor who was a psychoanalyst. And so then I joined a psychoanalytic group and did private practice with them, and really got steeped in analytic theory, which is much more depth kind of theory and much more attends to, what's going on in our subconscious. So like if I would ask you, well, why'd you wear that sweatshirt today? And let's pretend you aren't wanting to lie to me or something. You would say, by the way, it's a Black Fuel Cafe
honestly, it was
sweatshirt.
A bad sweatshirt to wear because I have a white cat, so
wow.
There's hair all over the place.
Well, there you go.
It was a mistake.
So he says it's a mistake. Yeah. That's what he says.
Yeah.
I wore this because it was a mistake. Well, he said let's pretend he said, I didn't do my laundry. It's the only clean thing, Barb.
Okay.
I had to wear that, right? But let's say your girlfriend's sitting here.
Yeah.
And she says, Barb, I don't know. That may be true, but all he wears are these fuel T-shirts or sweatshirts.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like he has a good memory from when he was drinking coffee and he would go and write at the Fuel Cafe. And I think subconsciously it really makes him feel comfortable to wear these things. So people around us kind of leak out their subconscious patterns, right?
Okay.
So people that we know, we can be like, oh, I know what you're going to do next because you're relatively predictable.
Yeah.
So in therapy, I think it's really a relationship in which a person is open to seeing your patterns and helping you kind of get more conscious of them.
Yeah.
Because we can fool ourselves into thinking, this is my intention, when really, I do that all the time, actually, and I'm really getting something else out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the craziest thing to me about it is like when I started going to therapy more consistently and I'm like, I can't believe I do that. Like there's things I didn't even notice that I did. And it was like mind blowing to me. I'm like, wow, I could have gone my whole life without even realizing that this was the reason that I was doing that, or like that I even was. Like it just, there's a lot of things. The brain is so complicated. That's what I have really learned.
Well, we're pretty amazing creatures, right? Our humanness is pretty complicated and fascinating. And I think good therapy holds up a gentle but clean mirror to us so that we learn more about who we are and what we are with a level of warmth and forgiveness instead of, well, I need to fix that, or how do I change that, or it's like, because a lot of people not only struggle, but we have quirks and foibles.
And everybody's different,
Yeah.
So as a psychotherapist, is that the right term?
Yeah.
What do you ever go to therapy? Have you ever gone to therapy?
Yeah.
Have you sat on the other side? Is it weird for you doing that?
Well, I haven't gone to therapy in years, but part of what I always talk to new clients about is part of how I practice is fashioned because of my experience being on the other side of the room, so to speak. And I went as a young adult, going through what young adults go through. All different kinds of confusing things because you think adulthood's going to be one thing, but it's usually not.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you get confused, and whether that's relationships or struggles with career efforts, and so part of it, I think it's really essential that therapists have that experience of being vulnerable, being on the other side of things, having to open up, and then experiencing different kinds of responses from the clinician. And I had 2 different therapists, and they were interesting to learn from. I think part of how I practice is structurally different than what they did because I didn't like, for instance, when I would wait for my therapist, one of them had us booked back to back. So I'd wait in the waiting room and I could see the person leave her office. Okay, here comes that person. And then she'd be like, Barb, and then I'd come in right after. And for me, that was weird. And I was, at that point, I probably was in grad school. One day I asked her, what's that like? That person just leaves and I come back.
Next.
And yes, that's what I did. And she said something like, everyone's so different. It's easy. Because I said, how is it for you to shift? Change, right?
And that quickly, too. Like, you just had that person. Now you have to completely change how you go about the next person. Instantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And while I know we're all different, I was talking more about her internal state of, I was just imagining, and it's true for me now, what I practice when I'm in private practice, so I'm my own boss, so I get to have a lot of autonomy, which is wonderful about how I practice. So I schedule people with 15 minutes or a half hour between them for myself because I just need to kind of get back to Barb before I enter in sitting down and relating to someone else.
Yeah, I just feel like it can get confusing too. It's like when someone's talking to you for an hour or 45 minutes and then you're like literally going to the next person, it's hard to just transfer and forget all the stuff you just did
Yes.
Or even just like make amends with it and be like, okay, that was whatever. And then move on to the next person. Like it's hard. It would be confusing in my mind. Like, oh, is this your problem or is this their problem? You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
I do know what you mean. And that's why I really need that buffer zone between people, because I also want to protect that next person from kind of runoff or something. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah,
but
no, I know what you mean.
Like if there's a theme that I'm really steeped in with one person, how do I shift into another person's needs or energy without kind of imbuing that next session with, oh, gee, this guy has all these mom issues.
Yeah. Do
now,
you?
Yeah, that must be because of your mom.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, wait, no, I need to clean that out. And I'm just less stressed in general personally when I'm slower paced.
Okay.
When I'm quicker paced, my neurochemistry goes a little wonky.
Yeah.
I get stressed out. I can't think straight.
Sure.
I was always that way. I always kind of failed at those timed multiplication tests or anything timed. I get really worked. My physiology gets worked up and I can't think straight.
Yeah.
So I have to pace myself.
So when someone comes into your practice for the first time, I always was curious about this. What is your like initial reaction, or like what are your initial thoughts like when someone just walks through the door? Like what does like a therapist think of like a new client? Are they just like, oh, we'll see what happens, or are they like already analyzing things as they walk in the door and as they sit down? Like, oh, he walks like this, maybe this is a problem. Like, does that happen?
Yeah, totally. We're just analyzing every effing thing that you're doing.
He's moving his left finger.
It's the fuel sweatshirt. Actually, with the analysts, everything is up for analysis. So when I was practicing with the analysts, you're looking at lots of things. Are they late? How do they arrive? What's happening in their presentation? I like to see where people sit. So I kind of see like, we'll sit wherever you want. Some people like the chair. Some people like the couch. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting though. So like, what if someone sat down on a couch rather than the chair? What would you think? What would you think about them? Is it based on like the space of where you are compared to them? Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, it can mean so many different things. I always think it's interesting because in my office we have a small couch and then a chair. Yeah. And typically I think most people would assume that the couch is for the client, because I think that's sort of in cultural, like in the movies or whatever.
I've had someone that like, I've gone to a therapist before and they're like, that's my chair, just so you know, as if I was going to sit over by her desk, you know. I'm like, I'm not going to sit there. Like, I'm not going to sit. I'll start typing away at your computer. Oh, I got work to do.
That's so she's being very territorial, right? Like,
I sit there. All right, I won't then. I'll make sure I won't.
And I think when people choose the chair that I assume people think is my chair sometimes, I think sometimes it's a power play. Yeah. With some people. Other people, I think it's much more actually a literal...
like they don't know where to sit and they're like kind of anxious about it.
Yeah, and it's more, the chair's more contained.
Oh, okay.
It's a... Oh, how do you describe it? Well, you know, when you sit in a chair, you feel more contained than the openness of a couch. Yeah. And I've had people then later ask about that, like, wait, I think maybe I wasn't supposed to sit here. And I'd be like, well, but do you have an idea of why you chose that? And like everyone knows, you tend to choose the same place all the time. So if you come in and sit in the chair,
You're next time... You're not going to change it up.
Yeah, I'm not... Next time, most of the time...
Go back and forth.
I think it's a rare time when people are like, oh, no, I'm sitting here versus there.
Yeah. Because in that situation, I was just thinking about where I would sit. I would sit for sure on the couch, for sure, every time.
It's interesting with couples therapy because the way that our office is configured, the couch is more like a love seat. So it's kind of close together. And then there's a chair, and then there's a more of a side chair I can pull up. Okay. So it's always interesting when couples come in right away and they totally one sits in the chair, one sits in, and I'm like, I'm not sitting on the couch with whoever. So I pull up the other chair. I'm like, okay, this is an interesting. It's not situation. A lot of togetherness going on.
Yeah. Like the psychoanalytic stuff is really interesting to me because like that's not something that I don't think even in therapy that I ever get a real glimpse of, because you wouldn't if you're a client, you know?
Right, unless you studied it or something.
Yeah. So what is you're talking kind of about this, like the subconscious, and like does that go back all the way to like even when you were a kid and stuff, and that stuff affecting you now in relationships and like things like that? Or
yeah, I mean, a typical analytic thought is a lot around childhood stuff and a lot around
and how that affects you,
how parents treated you and all that. Let me tell you, having kids for me, becoming a mother really broke that apart. Because our children are really different, and they're same parents, same DNA pool, and so that was super humbling and instructive for me to become a mother and to see that we're born into the world with such unique makeup and constitutions and physiologies, and that yes, kind of the nurture nature dilemma. I guess how I would say it is, in therapy school you're taught, and in analytic kind of thought you're taught more about the nurture, like how I treated the children is gonna see how they're gonna come out,
rather than your genetic makeup,
the genetic makeup. But I think we're learning much more about serotonin, about all kinds of neuro stuff, and so I'm now much more balanced, I think, in terms of honoring that the nature, what we're born with, really can impact all kinds of outcomes. And
I mean, I have to believe that it's a lot of both.
Exactly.
Like there are definitely things in both, and all like the brain and how it works and all that stuff always really interests me. And I've been reading more about secure and insecure
attachment stuff.
That's so fascinating to me.
That's a lot of analytic kind of work there.
And all the different kinds of secure and insecure relationships and stuff. And it's always kind of mind-blowing to me that like there's stuff probably in my head right now that happened in my childhood that I don't even realize that I'm thinking about subconsciously, but it's there and like dictating stuff. Is that an approach that you use in your kind of therapy, since it is more analytical and stuff like that? Do you go way back, or is it it
would go more like this? Like if you were sitting there and you were talking about, let's say you had a conflict with someone. I might say, well, you say, oh, when I talk about this, my chest becomes really tight. And then I might say, does that remind you of any other time? Oh, when I fought with my brother, I would get it, and then I might say, does that trigger any memory? And it may or may not. Let's pretend it says, when I was 6, my brother, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like using what's happening naturally in your thought process and in your body and in your instincts, and kind of seeing is there a loop? Is there kind of a thread that can go back to other times that can inform you about the pattern of why you might be reacting in a certain way? Does that make sense?
Because there was a point, a therapist I saw before, where we were going to start doing EMDR. Is that what it's called? And never got to that point, but like the explanation of like what it was interesting to me, about how you like certain eye move. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like certain eye movements and things like that can trigger memories or like things that happen, and like more so for like people with trauma and things like that. Is that a valid thing, or like something that is actually
I don't do it, and I don't know much about it, but I think it's valid. It sounds logical to me, and there's like when you look at certain places or look off, it triggers it. You access different parts of your brain. So if you look down and to the right, it accesses something in your brain up and to the left. Now that's, I don't know. I'm just talking about maybe an article I read. I don't do this. But it makes sense to me that stuff would work. And trauma stuff is really big now. That's a good trend that I think we do need to think about and read about and be aware of, because
Yeah.
trauma has its impact, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I guess so that leads into kind of like, what do you think of the community around, I guess, mental health now rather than when you started originally? Is it different? Has it changed a lot? I feel like there's this idea that, back in the 80s and 90s and things like that, mental health wasn't something that anybody wanted to talk about or even address. And now it seems that it's more open. And I can't really say that because I wasn't
Right.
going
weren't
to
around.
counselors in the 80s and stuff. And but do you think that's kind of how it is, or do you think it's maybe more just the way the world is, how social media, people are just more vocal generally about everything?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, right? There's so many factors.
Yeah.
It is really different now, and social media has a huge impact, right?
Yeah.
For better, for worse, there's people sharing their stories, which I think is super brave and helps others to feel not alone.
Yeah.
But also social media can trigger things and
Sure. Or make things worse.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is like, there's so many people that sit in my office and talk about what they see on social media and
Sure.
then do a compare contrast,
Oh yeah, that's
and they feel horrible.
yeah. Well, why wouldn't you? When you see everyone else living this grand life.
Right, and editing their selfies
Exactly.
and posting the most perfect pictures of the, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole nother thing. Like I took like a 2-month break from social media just because I was like, it was getting bad. Like it was getting to the point where I would it was habitual, and like I would wake up and like check things and I wouldn't even realize I was doing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to take a break and like not do that. But it's hard not to do that,
It's super addictive.
Yeah.
Like just so doing the Instagram. I am not on Facebook.
Yeah.
I only do Instagram. And I have a personal Instagram. I have a Spiffy Thrift is a thrift store, and then the MissMashedUp Instagram. So I have 3.
Yeah.
I have 3.
You're really working
mogul.
Instagram. Yeah.
I'm just like an Instagram mogul. But it's super addicting, right?
Yeah.
To check what your posts are doing, to see.
That's the worst for me, is going back and like seeing, because I'm like a photographer and do all that kind of stuff. So I love to look back and see if people like commented or like who liked it and stuff. If any like really cool accounts liked my photos. Yeah, it gets bad.
And the power of that, right?
Yeah.
Like the power of someone just liking a photo.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's just wacky how strong the power of that is. Yeah.
Yeah, and even just going back and looking through everyone's photos, it's really hard not to, even knowing that, you go on social media, people are only posting like the highlights. No one's posting them crying in the corner about how bad their day was. Like it's the greatest pictures.
Well, or there are those, right? I don't follow those, but I do think
they exist?
with
I didn't even know.
adolescence, there's here's how I'm cutting, here's how I'm trying to be bony and skinny.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that there are I think that there are a lot darker groups of.
It seems like the extremes is what's on social media. It's either really bad or really good, and even going on knowing that. You're like, oh yeah, this is just highlights of someone's life. It's hard to look through that and separate that still, which is always interesting to me. Like I can go on Instagram and scroll through and look at people's pictures and be like, okay, well this is like the best part of their day, or this is maybe their day was terrible and they just took this really nice picture. You know what I mean? I can think that in my head, but you still, for some reason, just can't. There's like a weird disconnect, because it's like, well, that's not a bad picture though. So. Can they really be having a bad day? You know what I mean? Like it's a weird back and forth.
Our brains tell stories. Our minds tell stories about things that we can look at a beautiful bowl of oatmeal and a cup of coffee that someone posted and think that must have tasted much better than any oatmeal I ever had.
I don't even like oatmeal, and wow, that looks good.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the stories we tell ourselves about these visuals we should be super impressed with how imaginative we can be, right?
Yeah.
Because it really has nothing to do. If we sat down next to that person posting the oatmeal picture and really had a heart-to-heart talk, it would be probably look nothing like the story we made up about the oatmeal.
Yeah.
But We do that.
I mean, that's kind of the digression of this podcast, is that just getting to know people, you know, and like really talking to them more than just looking at a photo or like a little conversation. Because I think that is the problem with a lot of social media and just our society in general right now. Not a lot of people want to chat with strangers and actually have a conversation and talk and and see what they're like, you know. And you can learn a lot about people from that.
Well, there's a lot to be learned in the, are they called outtakes, or the, you know, the stuff that we cut, right?
Yeah.
So if there was some law or, I don't know, rule that for every selfie posted, everyone had to post the 20 that they didn't post.
Yeah.
Right? The one with the booger hanging out, or the one where the light was like so bad and your triple chins were showing. And, you know, that would, because then we would see all those outtakes. Is that the right word?
No,
outtakes?
I know what you mean. Yeah. The ones you didn't use, the discarded photos.
Yeah, all the discarded. We get to go in the trash and like see all the ones you like deleted.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be a way better. That should be a platform where you have to do that.
I'm starting a new Instagram.
Yeah, it's gonna be all the trashed photos. But yeah, that social media is I have such a love-hate relationship with it, because like with what I do, I have to kind of be on it. But if I have my way, and
I don't even know you and never met you. So what do you do besides this microphone is in front of me? So I have to ask you, what do you do?
I'm a video producer. So I create the video content that they post on all their social media, on their website and stuff like that. And yeah, so I need to be on social media to like do that
promote
kind of stuff.
That stuff.
And even like be posting it sometimes, you know. So yeah, it's kind of a love-hate relationship with it, because if I had my way, and I don't know what this says about me, I would not be on social media ever and be out in the woods or something. Not living there, but you know what I mean? Like
be with nature, you mean?
My favorite part of doing photography is that like it gets me out, and like I shoot more landscape and kind of environmental shots. So I just like the idea of just going out there and just listening to music and just taking some pictures and stuff. It's just
super
nice.
Peaceful, right?
Yeah. But social media is just the opposite of that. And you know, Facebook is kind of the same to me as Instagram, with people just post. It's just more posting of great things that are happening in your life. Like some people you would look at and you'd be like, I would never know that, you know, you are having a terrible time in your relationship and you just got fired. Like it looks like you're having a great time living your life. And well,
that's where people will come in, of course, and say, oh, I trolled some old boyfriend or creeped on some ex-girlfriend, right? And oh, look, she met the love of her life after she broke up with me. And I'm like, how do you know?
You don't talk to her yet. You're just basing on pictures.
And if she saw yours, what assumptions is she going to make? You know, these are just all assumptions.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because like, what do you think that's been detrimental to like relationships generally? Because like I was thinking about this the other day, like 20, 30 years ago, even when I was a kid, when the internet was like in its infancy, you know, and things weren't really happening, do you think it was better for relationships that we couldn't see what was happening all the time, and like with other people, and like you couldn't contact them all the time, like you would have to call them and talk to them physically? Crazy, right? I know. What a world.
What a thought. Like we would be outside of our apartments and we wouldn't know anyone called us.
No.
Until we got back in the apartment. And then I remember like running to see the phone machine if it had the blinking light, which means then someone left a message.
Yeah, and even when I was young, I had to call someone else's house, talk to their parents so I could talk to my friend who I wanted to hang out with. Like there was some
layers and layers you had to get through, right?
Yeah, there was walls you had to break down to go hang out with people. But do you think that has some sort of like negative impact on relationships generally, that
it's too instant gratification?
We can see everything all the time too. Yeah, like there's no space ever, you know, where you kind of have your own thing, or you I don't know. It's weird that we know everything all the time. That's weird to me.
Yeah. Well, and then we don't, right? We know everything.
Yeah,
but
we know specific highlight things that maybe aren't even true.
Actually, this morning, one of my clients said, as humans, we need cognitive closure. And I thought that was really smart.
Yeah.
So we need to like have an answer. So, see, my ex-girlfriend, must be happy. So we make a story that we don't know. We make closure because we just, we make this thing up.
Yeah.
But as humans, I think that's true. We need cognitive closure for better, for worse.
Yeah.
We don't like things open-ended. So back in the day, we didn't know what those people were doing when we couldn't see them. We might have to drive by their house, get really creepy like that.
That might be worse.
Wake up now, you just reach your 3 a.m. You reach for your phone, you scroll their Instagram.
Oh no, they posted all these stories. They must be having fun.
It was like our parents would be like, I walked to school in 8-foot snow with no shoes. Now we're like, I creeped on my ex-boyfriend because I had to get in the car and drive in my PJs.
Yeah, exactly.
And stalk him outside the house.
I just think it's such a different world. Sometimes I wonder if I was like growing up in the 50s, like how different I would view even friendships and things like that. Because you couldn't see, like I can't see what my friend, like a lot of my friends live in California. And so like, I wouldn't be able to see what they were doing on a daily basis. I would just hear about it whenever they called or whatever. But it does interest me, like how those relationships even would be different if they were 30 years ago or something like that. It's weird. It's weird what social media has done. And I don't know if it's positive.
I think there's a lot of good and a lot of bad.
I just don't know where it's going to stop either. That's the thing.
Well, it's not going to stop, right?
Yeah.
This is the thing, is there's no going back. Except we're going to have pods of no cell reception. People are going to ache to get there, like how to like shut things down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been even considering going back to like a flip phone, honestly.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that. Just only having like text and call and not any of the other things on my phone. But there is do you know Headspace, the app?
Yep.
Yeah. I've been using that, and that's one of the positives of having a smartphone. I really like that. It's like, because with my anxiety, like doing, meditation every day, and I always feel like such a douche saying that, it's like, I got to go meditate.
Right.
Like it sounds bad when you say it to people.
Well, you're
it's
talking to a therapist
thing.
here.
I know, but you know what I mean, though.
Yes.
In the Midwest here, I feel like if I was in California, I'm like, I gotta go meditate. They'd be like, oh yeah, you do that. But here it seems like a weird thing to do.
Yeah, you're on the cutting edge because, this is what has to happen. We have to meditate and we have to like get mindful and slow everything down. That's that pacing thing.
Yeah.
Because when in our culture, when things are pacing us so quickly, we can get off the rails really easily.
Is that kind of a true thing though? Is it different working with clients based on your region? Like, is it being in the Midwest? Is it kind of a different, holistically vibe than like a coastal person? Or
you got me because I never practiced either place.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people, but I think, my clientele is pretty high functioning people. That doesn't mean that they aren't struggling with depression, anxiety, whatever, but they are executives or suburban folks having
people that
big
are living
lives.
their lives. They're just kind of hindered by something.
But that kind of type A personality that is like go, more. I think you add some social media on there, emails at night. It's hard to ramp down. Yeah. And so to use like the Headspace or the mindfulness or the meditation, to use those skills is going to be essential for people to manage the onslaught of all the stimulation that comes from that.
Yeah. I mean, it's even for me when I'm doing it's like only 15 to 20 minutes, but there's some days when I do it and I'm thinking like, when is this going to be over? Cause I need to do some stuff,
right.
Which is bad when you're like trying to like not think about that kind of stuff, but it's a learning process, I guess. When you are doing therapy and have clients, is there a specific time you kind of feel like, okay, well, we figured it out, or is it more like you want them to come for life? I
don't think it's very linear. I don't think it's like, okay, you're done, right?
Yeah.
You graduated and you don't need therapy ever again kind of thing. Because I guess I view therapy as more kind of like someone would use a workout person, right? A physical trainer or something, in which maybe there are people who actually use physical trainers because they're actually pretty darn fit, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I think that going back to your question before of like the changes over decades, is I think people now are more apt to see using therapy as much more of a accoutrement to their life to make them better. And a lot of people are fit. They just want to be fitter, so to speak.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And I see this to a lot of people. I'm like, just, because you think you're living a great grand life and stuff doesn't mean you can't benefit from going to therapy. Anybody can really benefit from going. And it's helpful if you're really, really, in a negative space, or if you feel like you're mostly in a positive space. Like, it can help you in some way. That's how I feel, at least.
Yeah. And even in the most simplest way, it's 1 hour that you don't typically look at your phone.
Sure, yeah.
You unplug from all that, and you have a neutral, in quotes, party. Because, clinicians are people who have opinions and perspectives, but hopefully neutral-ish and outside the epicenter of your life, that you could sit and unload that for an hour and sort through it.
Yeah.
I think it's super helpful, especially with internet, social media. Again, I think it was just hyperstimulation stuff.
Yeah.
Instead of the slower moving life of, back in the day where there were natural boundaries around things. Instead, now people's work comes in their phone and it's all overlapping.
There's never a break. Yeah.
There's not a break.
Yeah. It's not like you can just go home from the office and be like, oh, okay, I'm done. You can always check emails. You can always do things. There's no unplugging from really anything at this point. But yeah, my other question was like, how do you feel about medication for things that people like are dealing with?
I'm so glad we have medications for things. And I think that there's some really good ones out there, and people are greatly benefited from medication.
Do you think it's healthy to do it like forever? Like the thing that this is just my personal perspective, and I'm not a doctor, so don't take anything I say.
Am I.
Don't say anything I say as gospel. This is just my personal feeling about it. When I was younger and I got like diagnosed with OCD and anxiety and all this stuff, like their SNAP thing was like, put him on meds.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, no, don't do that. Because I have,
especially when you're young, because
my brain is still developing and stuff.
Yeah.
But that was just like their go-to thing. And my first thing was like, well, I don't want to change. Like, as in, like, I don't want my personality to change and like things like that, or to be like more depressed, or like, you know what I mean? Like the things that the medication side effects can do to you sometimes. Absolutely. And my other thing was like, as I grew older, I'm like, well, what, do I have to take this forever? Like that can't be good either. I don't know any medication that you're like, you should probably take this forever. It's like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. A lot of times doctors are like, only take this for 2 weeks because it's not good on your body forever. Mm-hmm. And I had a hard time being like, well, I'm taking this for, anxiety and OCD. Like, is that healthy to take forever? Like, that can't be good on my body. I don't know. That's just how I felt. But I had no research to back it up. That's just how I felt personally.
Yeah, well, it's a good instinct, right?
Yeah.
Did you follow that? Did they respect that?
Yeah, I've only been on medication like briefly, because I felt like, at least for my personal situation, that like I needed to figure out like the root of the problem and figure it out without medication, because like once I inevitably was off, all my problems were just going to be there again, Yeah,
so you had an instinctive kind of understanding of what functional medicine is about, which is about getting to the root versus treating the symptom.
Yeah, exactly. And and to me, the benefit of like all that medication stuff is that if you are like really bad and you can kind of lower your symptoms, go to therapy, like figure out what's wrong, so you're not like not functioning in the world, you know? And I that's the benefit I saw, but I never felt like that I was bad enough where it was like, okay, like I need to do this. Like there was times I went to the hospital and stuff, but like overall I was like, well, I'd rather just figure this out. But at the hospital, my guess is they really wanted to put you on medication. Oh my gosh, it wasn't even that. the hospital is just a whole nother thing, especially for mental health things, because they don't tell you anything.
It's tough, man.
They just, I go in there and I'm like, I'm having a heart attack, and they test me for all that stuff, and they're like, you're not having a heart attack. Goodbye. It's like, oh no, actually, it's your panic disorder. Oh, you should probably go see this therapist, or recommendations even. And that gets even worse, because then you're like, well, it could be, and you have that thought process, of, oh, maybe it is real this time, because they don't confirm or deny anything. They just tell you that it's not what you thought it was, and then they tell you to go.
Yeah. Been there, done that with panic disorder.
Yeah. It's not fun. It's not a fun place to be.
It's not fun. And I in my 40s, I developed panic disorder, and I'd be sitting in session, and I'd have a wave of what I know as panic.
Yeah.
But before I knew it was panic, I actually literally, here I am in a psychotherapy session, and I'm thinking, I got to get to the urgent care because I think I'm having a heart attack.
Yeah.
And my husband's a therapist too, and he was the one that was like, I think that's anxiety. I think you're having panic attacks, which is so weird, because I'm like, okay, that makes sense, but no, really, I think I'm dying.
It's the physical symptoms are so insanely accurate to like a heart attack. And the thing that was bad for me was that, WebMD exists. So like I can Google stuff and it's so funny how like powerful your mind is, because like you can like Google stuff and look stuff up, and then 2 weeks later, I'll have pain in my left arm. Never had it before. Why do I have that? Well, probably because I Googled it, and it's a sign of having a heart attack.
Right.
And
it's going to freak you out.
Yeah, now my body knows that, or my mind knows that. So it's just going to start doing it to me. But yeah, that's more along the lines of like where a lot of my like really bad panic attacks come from. I'm afraid of dying, like severely afraid. And I'm afraid that there's something wrong with me that nobody else knows. So like, when I get the physical symptoms of anxiety, I'm like, here we go. Here we go. It's over for me.
What do you do then?
Now I know that there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah, so you reassure yourself.
Yeah. So I know that, and I have enough like deep breathing tools and stuff like that where I can kind of like calm myself down I think that the worst thing for me to do, and I say this, having had a kind of a bad panic attack a couple weeks ago, but like, is that I can kind of most of the time nip it in the bud before it gets to the point where I start spiraling down the rabbit hole of like, oh man, this is bad.
Right. So that self-awareness where you feel kind of what do people with migraines call that? They get is it the halo or the something, they get that kind of warning thing. Yeah. So that, and you can kind of then shift the course maybe. Yeah.
And then I can, I exercise kind of to offset that too, and be like, well, and give myself more of that. Oh yeah, you ran 6 miles today. You're not having a heart attack. Like you're fine. And so I can just kind of ramp it down. But the weird thing about panic specifically is that like it comes out of nowhere for no seemingly apparent reason sometimes.
No, that's how mine was. It was very out of nowhere, and it was nothing. I wasn't thinking about anything. I wasn't in touch with it, but it's very physiological. Yeah. Very physiological. And I went on medication. I had to get through that time, then went off the medication. But back to your point about are these medications something we should be on forever? Who knows, right? And but I do think to treat the symptoms, sometimes symptoms need to be treated.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
But then sometimes if you have the wherewithal where you're like, I want to try to attend to what's really the root of this, that can be very gratifying in the long run to know that you figured that out and that you have these different tools. Yeah.
And even for like people with, bipolar disorder and things like that, I feel like how else do you treat that? But it can make it very dangerous, right? There's certain diagnoses that can be very lethal, very dangerous because the thoughts get into a reality that is so not reality and can lead them to do actions that are not And I don't know how familiar you are specifically. Do you have you treated clients with like bipolar disorder? Because that's always a more interesting one to me, because I have never experienced it, and I mean, I'm sure I've run into people or talked to people that have it, and I just didn't know. That one seems more severe to the point where like medication seems like a thing that's necessary almost to like allow you to function.
Yeah, I think it can be quite debilitating.
Yeah.
I think like anything, any of these psychiatric diagnoses that we have, there's ranges and spectrums, if you want to say that way, that some can be more easily managed by lifestyle or keeping stress low, all that stuff. And then there's some where like doesn't matter. You just really need to get on pharmaceuticals to help stabilize.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it sadly affects the other people around that person much more than the person themselves, because what they're doing and saying is pretty scary.
Yeah. I can imagine.
And so it's hard, right? It's hard to get that person convinced that they need treatment and help when they're feeling, especially in a hypomanic state, super great.
Yeah.
Top of the world. What's wrong, right?
Yeah.
Every thoughts are flying a mile a minute, and like it's all wonderful, and they're changing the world. I mean, I think of Kanye sitting down with Trump in that video. Sorry, Kanye. Yeah, I know you're listening.
Yeah, he's an avid listener.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's something that I've kind of realized too, is that when I was having my first panic attacks, and like my little brother and sister saw that, like that was a huge, like, they still to this day remember how terrible, like how.
So how old were you when that was happening?
I was high school, like a freshman in high school. That was when like the first ones kind of came on. So I was at home, and they like saw me like not be able to move my arms, and like like becoming almost like to the point where I couldn't like see anymore and stuff. And even just having anxiety generally around people is tough for people around you, and you don't really think about that a lot of the time because you're so focused on like what you're going through specifically.
Right.
You're not realizing that, you know, other people are affected by what is happening in your mind too.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So yeah, I think that's just another big reason why people should go to therapy. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Buy some MissMashedUp shirts and go to therapy.
There you go.
Here we go. It's like all good.
Yeah. You got but yeah, we can wrap it up there. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, it was. It was over an hour.
Oh, wow.
Which is a long time to have a conversation.
There you go. We have lots of topics. So, you know.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to We Never Met. The show is on every single Monday, and you can listen to it on iTunes and just wherever there are podcasts available. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah,
Is there any last minute plugs that what's your Instagram, all of your Instagram handles?
I'm not giving you my personal one, but
besides the other two. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so I have the thrift store at Spiffy Thrift, at Spiffy Thrift, and at MissMashedUp.
And how can people like order stuff from you?
Well, yeah, you can direct message me on Instagram, and then we have shirts at the Milwaukee Home Store in the 3rd Ward, and also at the Wax Wing.
Awesome.
Down on North Ave. 2 great stores. Shop local.
Yeah, wherever you are, shop local.
Yeah.
Shop at your local stores. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. This is great.
Yep.